I am Cassandra, 34 years old, and my life just changed forever. After years of struggling to make it as an artist, I finally received my dream opportunity to study in Florence, Italy. My art studio, which took 5 years to perfect, is the heart of my home. When my phone rang yesterday and I saw it was my father, his tense voice saying they needed to discuss something important sent a chill through me. I had no idea that conversation would force me to choose between my family and my dreams. If your family demanded your most treasured space, what would you do? Let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button before I tell you how my family tried to take over my life. The morning my father called started like any other. I was in my studio, sunlight streaming through the skylights I had installed myself, working on the final piece for my upcoming exhibition. This house represented everything I had worked for over the past decade. After college, while my friends were taking stable corporate jobs, I chose the uncertain path of a professional artist. There were lean years where I survived on ramen noodles and worked 3 side jobs just to afford art supplies. But slowly, my work began to sell. First at small local galleries, then at bigger venues in neighboring cities, and finally, I landed a contract with a prestigious gallery in New York. 5 years ago, I managed to save enough for a down payment on this modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. It was nothing fancy from the outside, but it had good bones and, most importantly, a room with perfect northern light exposure. I transformed that room into my dream studio, installing skylights, building custom shelving for my supplies, and creating a space where creativity could flow freely. The hardwood floors were splattered with paint in a way that told the story of hundreds of completed canvases. This space wasn't just a room to me, it was the physical manifestation of my journey as an artist. My relationship with my family had always been complicated. My parents, Richard and Margaret, were traditional people who valued stability and conventional success. They never quite understood why I would choose such an unstable career path. My father, a retired accountant, would constantly send me job listings for graphic design positions at advertising agencies, not understanding that commercial art and fine art were entirely different worlds. My mother, though slightly more supportive, would always preface her compliments about my work with, "It's nice that you have this hobby, but..." Then, there was my younger sister, Natalie. At 29, she had always been the golden child, following the path our parents had laid out. She married her college sweetheart, Brian, right after graduation, and promptly gave them 2 grandchildren, Emma and Jacob, now 3 years old and 1-year-old respectively. While my parents attended every single school play and soccer game of Natalie's growing up, they had missed my first major gallery opening because it conflicted with a dinner party they had already RSVP'd to. The irony was that despite choosing the stable path, Natalie's life had recently fallen apart. I had heard through my mother that Brian had been acting distant, but I never expected him to clean out their joint account and run off with his 22-year-old secretary. This left Natalie alone with 2 small children and no income of her own, as she had been a stay-at-home mom since Emma was born. What my family didn't know was that 6 months ago, I had applied for a prestigious artist residency program in Florence, Italy. The program only accepted 5 artists each year, and competition was fierce. I had submitted my portfolio without telling anyone, not wanting to face their discouragement if I wasn't selected. 3 weeks ago, I received the email that changed everything. Not only had I been accepted, but I had also been awarded a full scholarship that would cover my living expenses for the entire year. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. My exhibition was scheduled to open next month, and the residency would begin just 2 weeks after the closing. I had quietly made arrangements to lease my house to a lovely young couple, both professors at the local university, who were looking for a temporary place while their own home was being renovated. The lease was signed yesterday, and they would be moving in exactly 1 month from now. I hadn't told my family about any of this yet. After years of having my artistic pursuits dismissed as frivolous, I wanted to wait until everything was finalized before sharing my news. I knew there would be resistance, especially from my father, who would see it as another example of me being irresponsible. I had planned to tell them this weekend, over dinner at their house, where I could control the timing of my exit if things got tense. But now, with this unexpected call from my father, my carefully laid plans were being thrown into disarray. As I hung up the phone, agreeing to their visit later that afternoon, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. There was something in my father's voice that suggested this wasn't going to be a casual family visit. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning up my studio, covering my current works in progress, and trying to calm my nerves. At precisely 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, straightened my paint-splattered shirt, and went to answer it, unprepared for the storm that was about to enter my life. The moment I opened the door, I knew something was wrong. My father stood there with his arms crossed, a posture he only adopted when he was about to lecture someone. My mother stood slightly behind him, her face a mask of forced cheerfulness that didn't reach her eyes. And then there was Natalie, holding Jacob on her hip while Emma clung to her leg, both children looking cranky and tired. "Cassie," my father said, using the nickname I had repeatedly asked him not to use since I was 16, "we need to talk." Before I could respond, they all pushed past me into the house. Emma immediately broke free from Natalie and started running through my living room, her sticky fingers touching everything in sight. Jacob began to wail, a high-pitched sound that made me wince. "Emma, be careful," I called out as she approached a table, displaying several small ceramic sculptures I had created for my exhibition. Natalie made no move to stop her daughter. "Oh, let her explore," my mother said, waving her hand dismissively. "Children need to be curious." I bit my tongue and ushered them into the kitchen, the furthest room from my studio. I put on a pot of coffee, more to give myself something to do with my hands than because anyone wanted it. "So," I said, trying to sound casual, "what brings you all here today?" My father cleared his throat, a signal that he was about to deliver a prepared speech. "Cassandra, we need to discuss a family matter. As you know, Natalie has been going through a very difficult time since Brian left." Natalie sniffled on cue, bouncing Jacob, who was still fussing. "He emptied our accounts, Cassie. I can barely afford groceries, and the rent on the apartment is due next week." My mother jumped in. "The landlord won't extend their lease because of some noise complaints from the neighbors about the children. Can you imagine? Complaining about the normal sounds of children?" I felt a twinge of sympathy for Natalie's neighbors. Emma was now banging a wooden spoon I had given her against my kitchen cabinets, creating a rhythm that was quickly giving me a headache. "That's terrible," I said sincerely. "Have you spoken to a lawyer about Brian's financial obligations?" My father waved away my question. "That will take time. Natalie and the children need a solution now." "I could lend you some money for a security deposit on a new place," I offered, already mentally calculating how much I could spare without affecting my Florence plans. My parents exchanged a look, and my father's expression shifted into what I called his business face. "Actually, we've come up with a better solution," he announced. "You have this big house all to yourself, with 3 bedrooms. You only need 1 bedroom for yourself, and you're hardly ever home anyway with all your art shows and whatnot." My stomach dropped as I began to see where this was heading. "We think Natalie and the children should move in here," my mother stated, as if it was already decided. "Your spare bedroom can be for Natalie, and that room you use for your painting can be converted into a nursery for the children." I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. My studio? You want me to give up my studio? You can move all your art supplies to the basement, my father said matter-of-factly. There's plenty of space down there. It's not like you need all that natural light anyway, right? Art is art. I stared at them in disbelief. They had clearly discussed this plan extensively, without once considering how I might feel about it. I can't do that, I said, my voice sounding strangely calm even as my heart raced. My studio is essential for my work. The light, the space, everything is set up exactly as I need it. Natalie let out an exasperated sigh. It's just painting, Cassie. It's not like you're performing surgery. You can paint anywhere. Actually, no, I can't. I tried to explain. The northern light is crucial for color accuracy, and the ventilation system I installed is necessary for working with oils and— Cassandra, my father interrupted, his voice taking on the stern tone he used when I was a teenager staying out past curfew. This is about family. Your sister and her children need a stable home. They're in crisis. Surely your hobby can take a back seat to that. It's not a hobby, Dad. It's my career, my livelihood. I could feel my frustration building. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand condescendingly. Dear, we know you enjoy your art, but family comes first. Natalie has 2 small children who need a proper home. Emma chose that moment to dash out of the kitchen, and I heard a crash from the living room. I jumped up to find she had knocked over one of my smaller sculptures, which now lay in pieces on the hardwood floor. Emma! I exclaimed, unable to hide my distress. It was an accident, Natalie said defensively, not moving to discipline her daughter. Kids break things sometimes. It's just a little statue. It was for my exhibition, I said through gritted teeth. I spent weeks on that piece. See, this is exactly why we need to make some changes around here, my father declared. This house isn't child-proofed at all. All these breakable things everywhere, no gates on the stairs. It's not safe. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I'm sorry about Natalie's situation. Truly I am. But this is my home, and my studio is non-negotiable. I'd be happy to help Natalie find an affordable apartment, or even contribute to her rent for a few months until she gets back on her feet. Why would she pay rent somewhere else when there's perfectly good space right here? My mother asked, genuinely perplexed. Because this is my house, I said firmly. I bought it. I pay the mortgage. I get to decide how the space is used. Natalie's face crumpled, and she turned to our parents. See? I told you she wouldn't help. She's always been selfish, only caring about herself and her precious art. Natalie, that's not fair, I protested, but my voice was drowned out by Jacob's renewed wailing. What's not fair is me and my children being homeless while you have all this extra space, Natalie shot back. My father stood up, his face reddening. I thought you would be more understanding, Cassandra. Your sister needs you. We raised you to put family first. And I'm trying to help in a way that doesn't completely upend my life and career, I insisted. Your career? My father scoffed, making air quotes around the word. When are you going to grow up and accept real responsibilities? The conversation continued to deteriorate from there. By the time they finally left 2 hours later, we were at an impasse. My family was furious with me for refusing to convert my studio into a nursery, and I was hurt by their complete disregard for my life and work. The last thing Natalie said before storming out was, "This isn't over. We'll be back this weekend to start moving in, whether you like it or not." As I closed the door behind them, I leaned against it and slid to the floor, utterly exhausted. How had things gone so wrong so quickly? The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of text messages from my mother. Each one was more guilt-inducing than the last. Natalie cried herself to sleep last night. I hope you're happy. Your father and I are very disappointed in your selfish attitude. Family should always come first, Cassandra. We didn't raise you to be this way. I put my phone on silent and tried to focus on my work. I had deadlines to meet for my exhibition, and the stress of yesterday's confrontation was already making it difficult to concentrate. But my brushstrokes felt forced, and the colors weren't flowing together the way they usually did. After 2 hours of unsatisfactory progress, I gave up and decided to call my best friend, Elizabeth. Elizabeth had been my roommate in college and was now a successful interior designer in Chicago. Unlike my family, she had always understood and supported my artistic pursuits. I filled her in on everything that had happened, including my Florence acceptance, which I hadn't told her about yet either. "Holy crap, Cass!" she exclaimed when I finished. "Florence? That's amazing. And your family seriously expected you to just hand over your studio without even asking first? That's beyond entitled." Her indignation made me feel slightly better. I know, right? But now I feel guilty for saying no. Natalie does have 2 small children, and they do need a place to live. "But that doesn't mean it has to be your house," Elizabeth pointed out. "And it certainly doesn't mean you have to give up your studio. There are other solutions they haven't even considered." "Like what?" I asked, desperate for alternatives I could offer my family. "What about your parents? Don't they have a guest room? Or couldn't they help Natalie with the security deposit for a new apartment? Why is it all falling on you?" These were good questions that I hadn't thought to ask. Why was I the only one expected to make sacrifices? Before I could ponder this further, my doorbell rang again. I checked the time. It was barely 11 in the morning. "I have to go," I told Elizabeth. "Someone's at the door. I bet it's them again." "Stand your ground," Elizabeth advised. "And congrats again on Florence. That's the opportunity of a lifetime." I hung up and went to answer the door, steeling myself for another confrontation. To my surprise, it was just my father, standing alone on my porch. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice gruff but less aggressive than yesterday. I hesitated but stepped aside to let him enter. We sat in the living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "Your mother is very upset," he finally said. "I'm sorry about that," I replied, meaning it. I never wanted to hurt my mother. "You know, when you were born, Cassandra, I had such big plans for you. I saw you following in my footsteps, maybe taking over my accounting practice someday." I suppressed a smile at the thought. Me? An accountant? I could barely balance my own checkbook. "But you were always different," he continued. "Always with your head in the clouds, always drawing and painting. I never understood it." "I know, Dad." "I still don't," he admitted. "But what I do understand is that family takes care of each other. And right now, your sister needs help." I offered to help, I reminded him, just not by giving up my studio. "That room," he gestured vaguely toward my studio, "is just a room, Cassandra. It can be rebuilt anywhere. But your sister's children need stability now." I took a deep breath. "Dad, my studio isn't just a room to me. It's the culmination of years of hard work. Every inch of it is designed for my specific needs as an artist. The light, the ventilation, the storage, it's all custom. And it's not just about the physical space. This is my home, my sanctuary. I need boundaries." My father's expression hardened. "Boundaries? Is that what they teach you in art school? How to put up boundaries against your own family?" "That's not fair, Dad." "You know what's not fair? Watching my daughter put her painting hobby above the welfare of her sister and niece and nephew." I felt my temper rising. "It's not a hobby. When are you going to acknowledge that I've built a legitimate career? I support myself entirely through my art." I bought this house with money I earned from my paintings. I have a major exhibition opening next month. Why can't you see that what I do has value? My father stood up, his face flushed. Because finger painting doesn't put food on the table for two small children. It doesn't provide stability. It's a self-indulgent pastime that you've been lucky enough to make a few dollars from. His words stung like physical blows. After all these years, after all my accomplishments, he still saw my art as little more than child's play. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Fine, he snapped. But this isn't over. Your mother and I have decided to help Natalie move in here this weekend. You have until Saturday to clear out that room. You can't do that, I said, standing up to face him. This is my house. My name is on the deed and the mortgage. You have no right to make decisions about who lives here. We'll see about that, he threatened vaguely. If you won't willingly help your sister in her time of need, maybe we need to take more drastic measures. After he left, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. What drastic measures was he talking about? They couldn't legally force me to let Natalie move in, could they? The confrontation had left me shaken, but it had also solidified something in my mind. I needed to tell them about Florence sooner rather than later. I picked up my phone and saw 3 missed calls from my mother and a text from Natalie that simply read, Emma keeps asking when we're moving to Aunt Cassie's house. Thanks for disappointing a 3-year-old. The emotional manipulation was reaching new heights. I decided to call my mother, hoping to reason with her one-on-one. Mom, I said when she answered, we need to talk about this situation rationally. There's nothing to discuss, she replied, her voice chilly. Your sister needs a home for her and her children. You have space. End of story. But Mom, it's not that simple. This is my home, my workspace. I have the right to make decisions about my own property. Property? She scoffed. Listen to yourself. So cold and businesslike. These are your flesh and blood we're talking about. I know, and I care about them, I insisted. That's why I offered to help Natalie financially while she finds a suitable place. Your father told me about your conversation, my mother said. He says you've become very selfish, Cassandra. I didn't want to believe it, but I'm starting to think he's right. The conversation went downhill from there. By the time we hung up, my mother was in tears, and I was fighting the urge to scream in frustration. How had I become the villain in this story? All I wanted was to maintain the boundaries of my own home and pursue the opportunity I had worked so hard for. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversations with my family, wondering if I was indeed being selfish. But then I would think about my studio, about the Florence residency, about everything I had worked toward, and I knew I couldn't give it all up. There had to be another way, a solution that would help Natalie without requiring me to sacrifice my dreams. As I finally drifted off to sleep in the early hours of the morning, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would tell my family everything. About Florence, about the lease, about my plans. It was time for the truth, no matter how they might react. The next day, I spent the morning in my studio, trying to lose myself in my work, but my mind kept wandering back to the situation with my family. The unfinished canvas before me seemed to mock my inability to focus. I checked my phone and saw several more messages from my mother and Natalie, each more accusatory than the last. My father, surprisingly, had remained silent since our confrontation yesterday. Around noon, I decided I couldn't put it off any longer. I needed to tell them about Florence and the lease before things escalated further. I texted my parents, asking if they could come over tonight, and saying I had something important to discuss. My mother replied almost immediately, saying they would be there at 6 and that they were bringing Natalie and the children. With the meeting set, I called Elizabeth again, needing her reassurance. You're doing the right thing, she told me after I explained my plan. They need to know the truth, and honestly, Cass, this Florence opportunity is too important to pass up. You've worked your entire adult life for something like this. But what if they're right? I asked, voicing the doubt that had been gnawing at me. What if I am being selfish? Natalie has 2 small children and nowhere to go. Look, Elizabeth said firmly, your parents could take them in, or they could help her find an apartment. There are numerous solutions that don't involve you giving up your studio and your dreams. And let's be real, even if you weren't going to Florence, would giving up your studio for Natalie really be the best solution? You work from home. You need that space to earn your living. She was right, of course. Even without Florence in the picture, converting my studio to a nursery would severely impact my ability to work. Thanks, Liz, I said. I needed to hear that. Anytime. Call me after you talk to them, okay? No matter how late. I spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning the house and preparing mentally for the conversation ahead. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and opened the door. My parents stood there, with Natalie and the children behind them. My father looked stern, my mother anxious, and Natalie had a determined expression that worried me. Emma was clutching a stuffed bunny, while Jacob slept in a carrier. Come in, I said, stepping aside. My father walked past me without a word, followed by my mother, who gave me a tight smile. Natalie paused in the doorway. I assume you've come to your senses, she said, her voice low enough that our parents couldn't hear. We need to talk, I replied, not taking the bait. To my surprise, I noticed that Natalie's car was packed with boxes and suitcases. They had really come prepared to move in today, without my consent. The realization sent a wave of anger through me, but I tamped it down. Getting emotional would only make this harder. Once everyone was settled in the living room, Emma playing with some toys I had set out for her and Jacob still asleep, I took a seat across from my parents. I asked you all here because there's something important I need to tell you, I began. If this is more excuses about why you can't help your sister, we don't want to hear it, my father interrupted. Richard, my mother said, placing a hand on his arm. Let her speak. I took another deep breath. 3 weeks ago, I received news that I've been accepted into a prestigious artist residency program in Florence, Italy. It's a fully funded opportunity that only accepts 5 artists each year from around the world. My announcement was met with stunned silence. My father's brow furrowed, my mother's mouth opened slightly, and Natalie's eyes narrowed. Florence? My mother finally said. Italy? For how long? 1 year, I replied. The program starts next month, right after my exhibition closes. Next month? My father exclaimed. And you're just telling us now? I was waiting until everything was finalized before I shared the news, I explained. And there's more. I've already arranged to lease this house to a couple, professors at the university, for the duration of my stay. They signed the contract 2 days ago and will be moving in 4 weeks from now. If my first announcement had stunned them, this one seemed to genuinely shock them. My father's face turned an alarming shade of red. You leased your house? He sputtered. Without consulting us? Without considering your sister's situation? I made these arrangements before I knew about Natalie's situation, I said calmly. And frankly, even if I had known, this opportunity is too important for me to pass up. It's the chance of a lifetime for my career. Your career, my father spat, using the same dismissive tone he had yesterday. What about your family? What about your responsibilities? My primary responsibility is to myself and my own future, I said, surprised by my own firmness. I'm 34 years old, Dad. I get to make my own decisions about my life and my property. So, You're just going to abandon us? Natalie interjected, her voice rising. Run off to Italy while I'm struggling to keep a roof over my children's heads? I'm not abandoning anyone, I insisted. I've offered to help you financially while you find a suitable place. I can contribute to your rent for a few months, help with the security deposit, whatever you need to get established. But I can't give you my house, and I certainly can't give up this opportunity. How convenient, Natalie said bitterly. You get to play the generous benefactor from thousands of miles away while my children and I struggle to find somewhere to live. That's not fair, Natalie. I'm genuinely trying to help in a way that works for everyone. For everyone? My father interrupted. How does this work for Natalie and her children? How does this work for your mother and me, who will have to pick up the slack while you're off painting in Italy? His words cut deep. Pick up the slack? Dad, I'm an adult with my own life. I'm not leaving behind any slack for you to pick up. And as for Natalie, I've already said I'm willing to help financially. Money isn't everything, Cassandra, my mother said, finally joining the conversation. Natalie and the children need stability, family support, a sense of belonging. How can you provide that from Italy? The same way thousands of other families maintain connections across distances, I replied. Phone calls, video chats, visits when possible. And let's be honest, it's not like we've been a particularly close-knit family anyway. The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. My mother's face fell, and my father looked like I'd slapped him. What is that supposed to mean? My mother asked, her voice small. I hesitated, but decided that if we were having this conversation, we might as well have all of it. It means that for most of my adult life, I've felt like an outsider in this family. My choices have been questioned, my career dismissed as a hobby, my accomplishments minimized. Do you know that neither of you attended my first major gallery opening? Or that when I bought this house, Dad's first comment was to ask if I'd considered how difficult it would be to sell if my art thing didn't work out. We were just concerned about your future, my mother defended. No, you were concerned that I wasn't living the life you had planned for me, I corrected. And now you're upset that I'm continuing to make choices you don't approve of. This isn't about approval, my father argued. It's about family obligation. Your sister needs help. And I've offered help, I reiterated. Just not the specific help you demanded without even consulting me first. The room fell silent for a moment, broken only by Emma's quiet playing and Jacob's occasional stirring. Finally, Natalie spoke up, her voice trembling with anger. You know what? Keep your money. Keep your precious house and your stupid art studio. We don't need your help. She stood up and gathered Jacob's carrier. Come on, Emma. We're leaving. Natalie, wait, I said, standing as well. Please don't leave like this. I want to help you. I really do. If you wanted to help, you would have offered your house, she snapped. But no, your paintings are more important than your flesh and blood. Have fun in Italy, Cassie. Don't bother sending postcards. With that, she stormed out, Emma trailing behind her looking confused. My parents exchanged glances, then my father stood up. I hope you're satisfied, he said coldly. Your sister is heartbroken, and your mother and I are deeply disappointed. I never thought you could be this selfish. Dad, please, I began, but he held up his hand to silence me. Number, I don't want to hear any more excuses. You've made your choice clear. Art over family. I just hope someday you don't regret it. He helped my mother to her feet, and they followed Natalie out the door. As it closed behind them, I sank onto the sofa, feeling both relieved that the truth was finally out and devastated by their reactions. I had known they wouldn't be happy about Florence, but I hadn't expected this level of anger and accusation. I picked up my phone to call Elizabeth, needing her reassurance now more than ever, but before I could dial, I noticed a text from an unknown number. It was from the couple leasing my house, confirming our appointment tomorrow to go over final details. The reminder of my plans, of the exciting future awaiting me in Florence, strengthened my resolve. I had made the right decision, even if my family couldn't see it yet. With a heavy heart but a clear conscience, I went to my studio and lost myself in my work, the one thing that had always been there for me when my family wasn't. 3 days passed without a word from my family. I threw myself into my work, spending long hours in my studio trying to finish the remaining pieces for my exhibition. But the silence from my parents and Natalie weighed heavily on me. Despite the tension of our last meeting, this complete cutoff felt worse somehow. On the 4th day, as I was taking a break for lunch, my phone rang. It was my mother. I answered immediately, my heart racing. "Mom, is everything okay?" There was a pause, then a small sigh. "Hello, Cassandra. I think we need to talk." Her voice sounded tired, but calmer than the last time we spoke. We arranged for her to come over that afternoon, just her. I spent the intervening hours anxiously cleaning and rearranging things, as if a tidy house might somehow make this conversation easier. When my mother arrived, she seemed smaller somehow, more fragile than I remembered. We sat in the kitchen, cups of tea before us that neither of us touched. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," she began hesitantly. "About what you said, about feeling like an outsider in the family." I nodded, but didn't interrupt. "I never realized you felt that way," she continued. "I always thought, well, I thought you were just being independent. You were always so different from Natalie, so self-sufficient. I didn't think you needed our approval or attention the way she did." It was an illuminating admission. All these years I had interpreted their focus on Natalie as favoritism, while my mother had seen it as giving me the space she thought I wanted. "I did need it, Mom," I said softly. "I still do. I wanted you and Dad to be proud of me, to understand that my art isn't just a hobby or a phase but my life's work." She nodded, her eyes downcast. "Your father and I come from a different generation. We value security, stability. We worry about you." "I know you do," I acknowledged. "But I'm doing well, Mom. My career is thriving. The Florence residency is a huge honor, something that will open doors for me that I can't even imagine yet." "Italy is so far away," she said, a note of sadness in her voice. "It is," I agreed. "But it's only for a year, and there are phones, video calls. We can stay connected." She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "When do you leave?" 5 weeks from now. Right after my exhibition closes." "Your exhibition?" she repeated. "When is that exactly?" I told her the date, and to my surprise, she took out her phone and marked it in her calendar. "Your father and I will be there," she said firmly. The simple gesture meant more to me than she could know. "Thank you, Mom. That would mean a lot to me." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she broached the subject I knew was coming, about Natalie. "I still want to help her," I said quickly. "My offer stands. I can provide financial assistance while she finds a new place." My mother nodded. "I've been talking to your father about that. We've decided to let Natalie and the children stay with us for a while. Our house is bigger than yours anyway, and I'm not working, so I can help with the children." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. "That's a perfect solution, Mom. Why didn't you consider that from the beginning?" She looked slightly embarrassed. "To be honest, your father and I were hoping to start traveling more now that he's retired. Having Natalie and the children would complicate that. But," she added, straightening her shoulders, "family comes first. We can postpone our travel plans." The irony of her using the same family comes first argument that had been used against me wasn't lost on me, but I let it go. This was progress, and I didn't want to derail it. I think that's a wonderful plan, I said sincerely, and my offer to help financially still stands. I can contribute to Natalie's expenses while she gets back on her feet. My mother reached across the table and took my hand, a gesture so unexpected that I almost pulled away in surprise. You're a good person, Cassandra. A good daughter and a good sister, no matter what was said the other day. Tears pricked at my eyes. Thank you, Mom. That means a lot to me. We spent the next hour talking more openly than we had in years. I showed her my studio, explaining the importance of the light and the specialized equipment. She asked questions about my work, genuine questions that showed she was trying to understand. And I asked about her life, realizing with a pang of guilt that I hadn't been as attentive to her interests as I could have been either. When she left, we hugged tightly, and she promised to talk to my father and Natalie. It might take them a little longer to come around, she warned. Your father is stubborn, and Natalie is still hurting from Brian's betrayal. But give them time. I nodded, feeling hopeful for the first time in days. I will, Mom, and thank you for coming today. As I closed the door behind her, I felt like something fundamental had shifted in our relationship. For the first time, she had seen me, really seen me, as an adult with valid choices and a legitimate career. It wasn't complete understanding, not yet, but it was a start. That evening, I called Elizabeth to update her on the conversation with my mother. That's huge, Cass, she said when I finished. A real breakthrough. It feels like it, I agreed. I just hope Dad and Natalie come around too. They will, Elizabeth assured me. Your mom will work on them. And honestly, having Natalie and the kids stay with your parents makes so much more sense anyway. They have the space, your mom is home all day, and they're the grandparents. It's the logical solution. I know. I just wish they had seen that from the beginning instead of trying to commandeer my house and studio. People don't always think logically in a crisis, Elizabeth pointed out, and it sounds like your sister is in crisis mode right now. She was right, of course. Natalie's life had been upended in the most painful way. It was natural that she'd be looking for quick solutions and comfort. I just wished that solution hadn't involved sacrificing my dreams. So, Florence, Elizabeth said, changing the subject, have you started packing yet? Looking at apartments there? The shift to discussing my exciting future plans was exactly what I needed. We spent the next hour talking about Italy, art, and all the possibilities that awaited me. By the time we hung up, I felt lighter, more certain of my path than I had in days. The next morning, I woke to a text from my father. It was brief and formal, but it was something. Your mother told me about your conversation. I'm still processing everything, but I wanted you to know that we've decided Natalie and the children will stay with us. I hope your preparations for Italy are going well. It wasn't exactly a warm reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement of my plans without criticism, and that felt like significant progress. I texted back a simple thank you and went to my studio with a renewed sense of purpose. Later that day, as I was deep in my work, my doorbell rang. When I answered it, I was surprised to find Natalie standing there alone, looking uncomfortable. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. I stepped aside to let her enter, curious about what had prompted this visit after our last explosive encounter. "The kids are with Mom," she explained, as if reading my mind. "I wanted to talk to you alone." We sat in the living room, an awkward silence stretching between us. Finally, Natalie spoke. "Mom told me about your conversation yesterday, about you feeling like an outsider in the family." I nodded, not sure where this was going. "I never saw it that way," she continued. "From my perspective, you were always the strong one, the independent one who didn't need anyone. I was jealous of that, actually. Her admission caught me off guard. Jealous? Of me? But you were always the favorite. Natalie gave a small, sad laugh. Maybe with Dad, but I always felt like I had to fit into this perfect mold they created. Get married, have children, live the conventional life. You broke that mold. You followed your own path, and somehow you made it work. I admired that, even though I never said it. I was stunned by her perspective. All these years, we had each been viewing the other's life through such a distorted lens. I'm sorry about the other day, she continued. I was. I am in a really bad place right now. Brian left me with nothing, not even my self-respect. I guess I was looking for an easy solution, and your house seemed like it. I understand, I said, and surprisingly, I did. And I'm sorry about Brian. What he did was terrible. She nodded, blinking back tears. Mom and Dad said I can stay with them for a while. It's not ideal, but it's a roof over our heads until I can figure out what's next. My offer to help financially still stands, I told her. Whatever you need to get back on your feet. Thank you, she said softly. I might take you up on that. She paused, then added, Congratulations on Florence, by the way. That sounds like an amazing opportunity. The simple acknowledgement of my achievement, something I had rarely received from my family, meant more than she could know. Thanks, Nat. It really is. We talked for a while longer, not resolving everything, but at least beginning to understand each other better. When she left, we hugged briefly, a gesture that would have seemed impossible just days ago. As I closed the door behind her, I felt like I could finally breathe freely again. The path ahead was clear, both for me and for my family. There would still be challenges, still be moments of misunderstanding, but we had broken through a barrier that had stood between us for years. And that, perhaps, was the most unexpected gift of this whole difficult situation. The weeks leading up to my departure for Florence passed in a blur of activity. My exhibition opened to critical acclaim, with several pieces selling on opening night. To my surprise and delight, my entire family attended the opening, including Natalie and the children. My father still seemed somewhat reserved, but he made an effort to engage with the other gallery patrons and even asked me questions about my techniques and inspirations. My mother beamed with pride, introducing me to everyone as my daughter, the artist, a phrase I had never heard her use before. After the opening, we all went out to dinner together, the first time we had done so in years. The conversation was a bit stilted at times, but there was a genuine effort on everyone's part to connect. Natalie had enrolled in a paralegal certification program, determined to create a stable career for herself and her children. My parents were adjusting to having a full house again, but my mother admitted that she enjoyed having the children around. They keep us young, she said, watching as Emma carefully colored on the kids' menu, and it's nice to feel needed. My father nodded in agreement, bouncing Jacob on his knee. We've converted my home office into a playroom, he told me. The grandkids need the space more than I need a separate room for paying bills. The irony of him willingly giving up his space for the children after expecting me to do the same wasn't lost on me, but I chose not to point it out. He was making an effort, and that was what mattered. As the dinner wound down, my father cleared his throat, a signal that he had something important to say. Cassandra, he began, using my full name for once, I owe you an apology. The table fell silent, all eyes on him. My father rarely apologized for anything. I haven't always understood your choices, he continued, and I haven't always been supportive of your career. That was wrong of me. Seeing your exhibition tonight, seeing how people responded to your work, well, it made me realize that what you do has real value. It touches people, and I'm proud of what you've accomplished. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. After all these years, All I had ever wanted was his acknowledgement and approval. "Thank you, Dad," I managed to say. "That means a lot to me." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. "Italy is lucky to have you," he added, "and we'll be here when you get back." The rest of the evening passed in a warm glow of familial reconciliation. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of tension, but it felt like we had turned a corner as a family. In the days that followed, I focused on preparing for my journey. The couple leasing my house, David and Sarah, came by several times to go over details and ask questions. They were respectful of my space and excited about living in a house with such a beautiful studio, even though they weren't artists themselves. "We'll take good care of it," Sarah promised as they were leaving after their final visit. "And we'll make sure everything is exactly as you left it for when you return." I appreciated their consideration, which stood in stark contrast to how my family had initially approached the situation. It reinforced my belief that I had made the right decision in leasing the house to them. Natalie and I continued to rebuild our relationship, meeting for coffee weekly and talking more openly than we had in years. She had found an affordable apartment not far from our parents' house and was planning to move in with the children in a few months, once she had saved enough for the security deposit and first month's rent. I had already transferred money into her account to help with these expenses, despite her initial reluctance to accept it. "I'm not used to you being the responsible, financially stable one," she joked during one of our coffee dates. "It's taking some getting used to." "I'm not used to it either," I admitted with a laugh, "but I like it." 2 days before my departure, my parents hosted a farewell dinner at their house. It was a bittersweet evening, filled with good food, reminiscences, and a few tears. My mother had created a scrapbook of family photos for me to take to Italy, "so you don't forget us," she said, only half joking. My father presented me with a new set of high-quality brushes. "Your mother helped me pick them out," he explained. "She said these were the ones you'd been eyeing." The fact that they had put thought into what I would actually want and need touched me deeply. It was such a change from the dismissive attitude they had shown toward my art in the past. Even Natalie had a gift for me, a beautiful leather-bound sketchbook. "For all the inspiration you'll find in Italy," she said as I unwrapped it. Emma had drawn me a picture, a colorful scribble that she proudly identified as Aunt Cassie painting. And Jacob, at Natalie's prompting, gave me a slobbery kiss on the cheek that made everyone laugh. As the evening came to a close, I looked around at my family, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was sadness at leaving them, especially now that we were finally finding our way back to each other. But there was also excitement for the adventure ahead, and a new confidence that our relationships would weather the separation. "Promise you'll call every week," my mother said as she hugged me goodbye. "And send pictures. Lots of pictures." "I will, Mom," I assured her. "And you can visit. Florence is beautiful in the spring." "We just might do that," my father said, surprising me. "Your mother and I have been talking about a trip to Italy for years. Now we have the perfect excuse." The idea of my parents visiting me in Florence, of sharing that part of my life with them, filled me with unexpected joy. "I'd love that," I said sincerely. When it was Natalie's turn to say goodbye, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. I'm going to make you proud while you're gone." "I'm already proud of you," I told her. "You're rebuilding your life on your own terms. That takes courage." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "Go create beautiful things in Italy, sis, and then come back and tell us all about it." The day of my departure arrived with a flurry of last-minute packing and preparations. David and Sarah came by in the morning to get the keys, and I gave them a final tour of the house, pointing out all the quirks and features they might need to know about. "The water heater sometimes makes a strange noise, but it's nothing to worry about," I explained, "and the back door sticks a bit in humid weather." They listened attentively, taking notes and asking questions. As we finished the tour in my studio, Sarah touched my arm gently. "This is a special space," she said. "I can feel the creativity in it. It will be waiting for you when you return." Her words reassured me. My home, and especially my studio, would be in good hands during my absence. My family arrived at noon to drive me to the airport. We loaded my luggage into my father's SUV, and I took one last look at my house before getting into the car. It was strange to think that I wouldn't see it again for a year, but I felt at peace with my decision. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The drive to the airport was filled with last-minute advice and reminders, mostly from my mother. "Don't forget to register with the American Embassy," she said for the third time. "And be careful about pickpockets. I've read they target tourists." I assured her I would be careful, touched by her concern, even as I found it slightly amusing. It felt good to be fussed over, to be reminded that I was loved and would be missed. At the airport, we parked, and my father insisted on accompanying me to check in and get my boarding pass. "Just to make sure everything goes smoothly," he said, though I suspected he wanted to extend our time together as much as possible. The moment of final goodbye came all too soon. We stood together at the security checkpoint, the furthest point my family could accompany me. "Call us when you land," my mother said, hugging me tightly. "No matter what time it is here." "I will, Mom," I promised, returning her hug. My father embraced me next, his usual reserve giving way to emotion. "I'm proud of you, Cassandra," he said, his voice rough. "Never forget that." "I won't, Dad," I said, fighting back tears. Natalie hugged me last, with Emma clinging to her leg and Jacob in her arms. "Send postcards for the kids," she said. "They'll want to see where their aunt is." "Of course," I agreed, bending down to hug Emma too. "And you'll send me pictures of them, right? I don't want to miss anything." "Every milestone," Natalie promised. "Now go, before we all start crying and make a scene." With one last wave, I turned and headed through security, my heart full. As I looked back one last time, I saw my family standing together, watching me go. It was an image I would carry with me across the ocean, a reminder of where I came from and who would be waiting when I returned. Florence exceeded all my expectations. From the moment I arrived, I felt a connection to the city, to its rich artistic heritage and vibrant creative energy. The residency program was housed in a renovated 16th-century palazzo, with studios that boasted the kind of light artists dream about. My fellow residents, 2 from Europe, 1 from Japan, and 1 from Argentina, quickly became both friends and artistic collaborators. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of orientation, settling into my small but charming apartment and beginning to establish a routine. I called my family regularly, sharing my experiences and discoveries. My mother and father seemed genuinely interested in hearing about the city, the food, and especially my work. Natalie often joined these calls, sometimes with the children making noisy appearances in the background. "Emma asked if you could see the Leaning Tower from your window," Natalie told me during one call, laughing. I tried to explain that Pisa and Florence are different cities, but she insists that all of Italy must be visible from wherever you are. These connections to home helped ease the occasional homesickness I felt, especially during the first month. But as I immersed myself more deeply in my work and in the life of Florence, I found myself flourishing in ways I hadn't anticipated. My artwork began to evolve, influenced by the Renaissance masterpieces I studied in the Uffizi and the contemporary art scene I discovered in the city's smaller galleries. The program's mentor, an established Italian artist named Gabriella, challenged me to push beyond my comfort zone, to experiment with new techniques and perspectives. "You have found your voice," she told me, after reviewing my latest series of paintings. "Now you need to make it sing." 3 months into my residency, I received an unexpected email from a gallery in Milan, inquiring about including my work in an upcoming exhibition focused on emerging international artists. Gabriella had recommended me, impressed by the growth she had seen in my work. The opportunity was beyond anything I had imagined happening so early in my residency. When I shared the news with my family during our weekly video call, their reactions surprised and moved me. "That's my girl," my father said, beaming with pride, always exceeding expectations. "We're going to come for the opening," my mother announced. "Your father and I have been talking about it, and we're not missing this." "Really?" I asked, stunned by their enthusiasm. "It's a long way to come just for an exhibition." "Not just any exhibition," my father corrected. "Your exhibition. In Milan. That's worth crossing an ocean for." The exhibition was scheduled for 2 months later, giving my parents time to arrange their trip. To my surprise, Natalie also expressed interest in coming, though she wasn't sure if she could manage it with the children and her new job at a law firm, where she had recently been hired after completing her paralegal certification. "I'm so proud of you, Nat," I told her. "How are you balancing work and the kids?" "It's challenging," she admitted. "But Mom helps a lot, and I've found a good daycare. And honestly, watching you pursue your dreams gave me the courage to go after mine. If you could move to Italy for your art, I could certainly go back to school while raising 2 kids." Her words touched me deeply. I had never thought of my choices as potentially inspiring to my sister. Our relationship had always been so complicated, marked by competition and misunderstanding. But now, thousands of miles apart, we were finding a new way to connect, to support, and encourage each other. True to their word, my parents arrived in Italy for the Milan exhibition. They spent a week with me in Florence first, exploring the city and seeing my studio at the residency. My father, to my continued amazement, showed genuine interest in my creative process, asking thoughtful questions and listening attentively to my explanations. "I never understood before," he confessed one evening, as we sat in a small trattoria, enjoying pasta and local wine. "Art seemed like such an impractical pursuit to me. But seeing you here, seeing how your work affects people, how it communicates across barriers of language and culture, I get it now, Cassandra. I truly do." My mother, always more emotionally expressive than my father, simply hugged me and said, "You were right to come here, to follow your heart. I'm sorry we ever made you doubt that." The exhibition in Milan was a success beyond my wildest dreams. 2 of my pieces sold on opening night, and a critic from an international art journal wrote a glowing review that specifically highlighted my work. Standing in that gallery, surrounded by my art and my beaming parents, I felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond professional success. It was the feeling of being truly seen and accepted for who I was by the people whose approval I had sought for so long. Natalie couldn't make it to Milan, but she sent a beautiful bouquet of flowers and a card that read simply, "Shine bright, sis. We're all basking in your light." It was perhaps the most generous, loving message she had ever sent me. As the months of my residency continued, I found myself growing not just as an artist, but as a person. The distance from home, from the familiar patterns and expectations, allowed me to see myself more clearly. I realized that for too long, I had defined myself in opposition to my family's expectations, rather than simply following my own path. The anger and resentment I had carried for years began to fade, replaced by a deeper understanding of both myself and my family. My parents visited again in the spring, as they had suggested they might, this time bringing Natalie and the children. Watching Emma and Jacob experience Italy through their wide eyes, their excitement at simple things like gelato and pigeons in the piazza, added a new dimension to my own experience of Florence. One afternoon, while Natalie and my parents took the children to see the carousel in the Piazza della Repubblica, I sat in my apartment reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I had been fighting with my family over my studio, feeling misunderstood and unappreciated. Now, they had traveled across the world to share in my life and my success. The irony wasn't lost on me. If they hadn't pushed me to give up my studio for Natalie, I might never have told them about Florence when I did. That conflict, painful as it was, had forced us to confront the deeper issues in our relationships, the unspoken expectations and misunderstandings that had divided us for years. Sometimes, I realized, the most precious gift we can give each other is the truth of who we are, even when that truth is difficult to hear. My family had wanted me to conform to their idea of family obligation, while I had needed them to recognize and respect my own path. Both were valid needs, but it had taken a crisis to bring them to the surface where they could be addressed. As my residency neared its end, I faced a decision about what came next. David and Sarah had asked if they could extend their lease of my house, as they had fallen in love with the neighborhood and wanted to stay while they continued their search for a permanent home. I had job offers from galleries in New York and Chicago, and Gabriella had suggested I consider applying for a teaching position at an art academy in Rome. The world seemed full of possibilities, in a way it never had before, and whatever I decided, I knew my family would support me. Not because they necessarily understood or agreed with every choice, but because they had learned to trust in my ability to create a meaningful life on my own terms. On my last night in Florence, I sat on the rooftop terrace of the palazzo, watching the sun set over the city that had become my second home. I thought about the studio waiting for me back in America, the space I had fought so hard to protect. It was still important to me, still a sacred creative space, but I no longer felt defined by it, or by any physical location. My art, my creativity, my sense of self, these would travel with me wherever I went. The most valuable thing I had learned in this year abroad wasn't about technique or style, or even career advancement. It was about the delicate balance between honoring our connections to others and being true to ourselves. It was about recognizing that sometimes the greatest act of love is not sacrifice, but authenticity, not conformity, but courage. As the last light faded from the sky, I made a silent promise to myself. I would continue to pursue my artistic vision with passion and dedication, but I would also nurture the renewed connections with my family, the hard-won understanding we had found together. Both were essential parts of who I was, who I wanted to be. The next chapter of my life was still unwritten, a blank canvas waiting for the first stroke of color. But now, I approached it not with fear or defiance, but with confidence and joy. Whatever image emerged, it would be authentically mine, created with love and shared with those who had finally learned to see me clearly. Have you ever had to stand up for your dreams against family pressure? What did you do? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your path in life. Share this with someone who might be struggling to follow their own dreams, to remind them they're not alone. Thank you so much for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people we love the most, but they're often the most important ones.